Yes, Cyrus says name of the program. Obviously, our sponsors will tell you that. Oh, that's right. We don't have any sponsors. But let's talk about who we have. We have a great guest coming up. Before I bring him on, I want to just say they've started charging us money for parking the car in my lane where the office resides, and that's just hugely irritating. To go with $100 on the petrol, the Oval Maidan being shut, so I can't take my dogs anywhere, and now this, the unkindest cut of all, to charge me to park my car in office I don't want to go to. Unbelievable. So I've decided that I'm going to start a petition to ask for them to return. Them, well, the people who were here till 1947. Now, I don't want any letters, no sedition, no treason, no arresting me. This is a bit of very poor satire, so please leave it as it is, because I can't afford the whole country. They're in lockdown in any case, so they can't leave their house. Forget coming to India. But we can get Huw Cordey here. And let me tell you, Huw Cordey, firstly, welcome to the show. And this is our second attempt at getting together.
Thank you very much, Cyrus. It's a pleasure to be here. Or, well, I haven't moved, of course. I'm still in Bristol.
Ooh, that's right. And you have a second wave there in Gloucester. Did I read that somewhere?
Yes, we're worried about a variant north of where I am at the moment.
Yes.
Somebody sort of disappeared into the South Gloucestershire countryside with potentially this. I think it's the South African variant, is it?
Or Brazilian.
Or Brazilian. No, Brazilian variant. That's right.
Oh my God, I spend more time watching BBC than you.
There are so many variants, you can't keep up with them.
Fair enough. In fact, sometimes I think that they're taking the mickey out of us on this variant thing, because it's like it seems to have no ending, and then you suddenly think, what's the point? Like there doesn't seem to be you can just have mutation after mutation.
I know. Well, it's in part of the natural cycle of a virus anyway. So, these will come and go over the next
But you guys banned homeopathy, which is the real cause. I mean, the one thing that can stop anything, according to my mother. She's been giving it to everybody from cold to cancer, just 3 white pills or 4 white pills, and you're good.
Now, that's a very controversial subject, Cyrus. Probably won't get into that.
All right, let's get into your subject. And firstly, it's a pleasure. I'm a bit of an idiot, so I may ask stupid questions from time to time, but please remember that it's all done with a lot of love and affection, because I miss the British, Welsh or English or Irish. A bit of an Anglophile, as you can tell, and I'm not one of those guys that says, let's find something original. I'm quite happy. Cricket, the Beatles, Shakespeare, Oscar Wilde, I'm done. All right, let's talk about this show. Very excited. A brand new show. Once again, idiot human beings may or may not imbibe correctly, but the idea is to educate and create awareness. Conservation is the conversation. I like to say those 2 words together. So Huw, take it away. Tell us what it's all about. It's launching next week.
Well, first of all, I should tell you that it's premiering on the 8th of March at 9 p.m. on Sony BBC Earth. And it's a 5-part series looking at the forces of the planet. The first 4 episodes are about the natural forces, about volcanoes, ocean currents, the sun and weather, and how these natural forces shape our planet and its diversity. And the 5th episode is about humans, the 5th force, the newest force, the force that's destabilizing the other 4 natural forces, the one that we really need to worry about.
The negative protagonist, so to speak. Can we go through each one of them for a couple of minutes just to understand? Let's take, volcanoes first?
Yes, so volcanoes, I think most people, if you ask them in the street, if you did a straw poll, they would say that volcanoes are destructive and our planet would be much better off without them. And of course, they do and have killed a lot of people over the years and animals and have caused huge problems for nature. But the simple fact is that you and I wouldn't even be sitting here were it not for volcanoes. Volcanoes have given us our breathable atmosphere. When the planet started 4.5 billion years ago, they created the oceans. They're responsible for 80% of the land we sit on. They fertilize our planet. So they are fundamental to the life on this wondrous planet.
Huw, you've got me. I have to ask the question, because being in my 40s and not knowing enough about this, I must understand. You're saying volcanoes created the oceans?
Yes. So at the beginning of our planet's history, there was a huge amount of volcanic activity, and this created a lot of water vapor. And when the planet cooled, that water vapor condensed, like the air in a shower room. And then that's what created the oceans.
Wow, what a nice paradox. All right. So what's the deal with volcanoes now? They're less and less, and there should be more from a simpleton's guidebook?
No. And in fact, it's a balance. I mean, There were various periods in our planet's history when there was too much volcanic activity and it created huge amounts of carbon in the atmosphere and actually created mass extinctions. So there have been 5 mass extinctions, of which most of them have volcanoes at their core. So we don't want too much volcanic activity, but we can't have too little. Right now, in any one given year, there's about 1,500 active volcanoes around the planet. This doesn't include the ones undersea because we can't see them, and actually that's where most of volcanic activity is. But around 30 volcanoes erupt every year. And this obviously throws up carbon into the atmosphere. And, you know, in excess, it would cause issues and change the temperature of the planet. But we'll probably get onto this, but if humans have become the new volcanoes, we humans put more carbon into the atmosphere, 100 times more carbon into the atmosphere than all the volcanoes on our planet combined.
Wow.
But of course, the other thing to realize about carbon, although we all see it as a destructive gas, and because it's warming our planet and creating huge problems, of course, it's also fundamental to life on our planet because it's a necessary gas for photosynthesis. So were it not for carbon, plants couldn't photosynthesize, and we wouldn't have any food chains.
Okay. So now I'm even more confused than before because basically what you're saying is volcanoes, which I thought was dangerous and you have to avoid, is actually essential. And carbon, which one thought was good, was bad, is now actually good, but yet bad.
Yes, it's very complicated, and I can't begin to sort of be an expert on this because it is quite complicated. But what I can tell you is that carbon is an important gas in our atmosphere because it's used in photosynthesis. But when it becomes the ratios become too high, obviously it creates a warming planet. So it blocks off it traps the sun's heat, and that is what's happening at the moment. And that's why we need to be worried about the burning of fossil fuels and the increase of carbon in our atmosphere.
Okay, so Hugh, for the Indian listeners, we have about 9 of them. Do we have a volcano nearby in our neck of the woods? I mean, because I'm so sorry that I have no knowledge about volcanoes, except for our leading Bengali politician, Mamta Banerjee, who is known to be a volcano, but that's perhaps not the right example. Anything
Oh,
in the area? South
I'm
Asia?
trying. I'm trying to think.
Japan for
There
sure?
must.
No.
Oh, there must be volcano. I mean, obviously. Funny. You've put me on the spot there, Cyrus. I can't
Why
think
can't you just
of an
lie,
act.
Hugh? All my guests lie.
No,
Just
I'll tell you. I'll tell you why. Because you probably have huge numbers of extremely knowledgeable, intelligent people listening to your program. And if I say anything that's not true, in fact, probably already you're going to get letters about crap that I've been telling you about. But hopefully not. Hopefully I'm on a fairly stable wicket at the moment,
worry.
unlike our English batsmen.
Okay, we'll get into that in a minute as well if we have time. But let's look at the others. So that's volcanoes. Then
Yes.
the second force is Earth,
Well, the sun.
the
The
sun.
sun. So obviously, the sun is incredibly important. One of the interesting aspects of the sun in terms of the Earth is our planet is on a tilt, 23.5 degrees. And that means that different parts of our planet get different amounts of sunlight depending on where you are at different times of the year. So as our planet travels around the sun on its annual journey, the tilt means that different parts of our planet are facing towards the sun at different times. So in the northern hemisphere in the summer, the top part of our planet is facing towards the sun. That's why we have summer. And the southern hemisphere is pointing away. That's why they have winter. And then the reverse is true 6 months later. But what's really interesting is despite this tilt, and this tilt is fundamental to life on our planet because it gives us the seasons. But one of the things about the planet is that over the course of a year, every square meter of the planet gets the same amount of sunlight a year. So it just happens in different ratios.
But so what you're saying is that that angle was to change, we'd have like different seasons, or maybe darker
If the
seasons
ang-
or lighter seasons.
Well, we like to think of it as a sort of perfect angle because it means that the angle means that no part of our planet becomes unlivable. The more extreme the tilt, the more extreme the ends of the Earth. So most planets are tilted, but some of them are so tilted that you'd get sort of like crushingly cold winters or boiling summers,
Isn't that
and
happening?
it wouldn't be, yes, but not to the point yet that animals can't survive in literally every corner of our planet. So the tilt is perfect. It's not too much, not too little. You've heard of the sort of it's the same is true for our distance from the sun. So we are the perfect distance for the sun. If we were too close, it would be too hot and there wouldn't be any ice. If we're too far away, there'd be too much ice and not enough water. The great thing about our current position, the distance from the sun, it means water could be found in all its three forms: ice, liquid, and vapor. And of course, that's very important. And that's why we're also known as the Goldilocks planet, the perfect planet. Do you know the story of the Goldilocks three bears?
I do. Most Indians have blonde hair. This is a very popular story. Yeah, of
Anyway,
course we do.
that's why sometimes our planet is called the Goldilocks planet. It's just perfect. So there's a lot of cosmic fortune, and the cosmic fortune is the distance from the Earth, the distance from the sun, the tilt of the planet, the fact that we have a moon that stabilizes the planet and gives us the tides. But those things are sort of were things way outside our control. The natural forces are the things that keep our planet going, on a yearly basis, and are important to sort of life on Earth. And those are fragile, and they're beginning to be changed by humans, the fifth force.
So even the most powerful force, the sun, is in danger. We play the villain against the sun as well.
Yes, because of course carbon means we're trapping more of the sun's heat on our planet. And that is causing huge problems because, it's affecting our weather, the stability of the planet. So for 10,000 years, a period we call the Holocene, everything has been in perfect balance. So, we've been living in sort of like the Garden of Eden for 10,000 years. Volcanic activity has just been right, and all the other forces are working in perfect harmony. And it's because of that stability, humans have been able to evolve these incredible societies and cultures because we could predict the future.
So
And that's
sorry, go on, go on. Don't go on,
no,
please.
and while we can predict the future, we could, we've been able to create these incredible cultures and societies. And that's why we need to worry, because our stability is beginning to be eroded by climate change.
And am I correct to say that all along, let's say up to the last 100 or 150 years, everything was going smoothly? The relationship between human beings and the environment was fine. And it's just in the
Yes.
last 150, and especially the last 10 or 20, where we've galloped ahead with destroying the infrastructure that we should have looked after, in a sense.
Exactly. Well, it's the Industrial Revolution, which of course all started in the UK. So we're the big villains
I
here.
point the finger,
Yes,
young man. I
yes.
point the finger.
You can point the finger. The birth of this sort of internal combustion engine is where it all started going wrong. Of course, it's been amazing for human society. Look at the things it's been able to do for us, but the consequences it's being felt now, and the more carbon we put into the atmosphere, the more we are risking our future.
But you see, I think it's just obvious that we just don't know. Like, I don't know. I'm reasonably, well, that's a stretch. I'm slightly educated, but I'm just thinking that across the world, different cultures, different people, they don't pay attention enough. They do a lot of lip service. Everybody says the right thing at the right place and all that. Even collective governance says the right thing, doesn't always do the right thing. So the whole point here is nobody's taking this as seriously as they should. People in prominent positions, or is it just the fact that we really it's just too far gone? The modern world and digital world is just too far gone in one direction. It's tough to pull back.
No, I think people are beginning to take it incredibly seriously. I mean, look at President Biden. One of the first things he did was, reverse what Trump had done with the Paris Agreement. He's gone back into Paris. A lot of his first proclamations have been on the climate. I think most countries are taking this extraordinarily seriously because they know it could destabilize their communities, their societies.
What about China, India, and Russia? How are we doing?
Um, I think China obviously fingers have been pointed at China with the amount of carbon they produce through sort of coal mining and so on. But I think they will probably change fairly quickly, and I wouldn't be at all surprised that in 10 or 15 years we'll be looking at China as leading the way in terms of these alternative technologies. India is the same. I don't think India is any different from many other countries. I think your leaders appreciate the situation we're in, and trying hard to change it. Of course, it's not easy. It's like trying to, shift the direction of this massive juggernaut. But it's got to start somewhere. It is already starting. I think we're getting, certainly in the UK, we're getting more and more of our energy from renewable sources, and I think that will increase across the planet.
All right. We'll leave
I'm an
Russia.
optimist.
We'll leave Russia out of it. Uh, no, I suppose that's correct. What's the point of doing all this if there's no positive force coming through it, and no sense of things going in the right direction? Maybe the next generation. That's hope. People who live in my
Mm.
house and don't pay bills, those kind of people. Let's move on. So we've got two down. We've got volcanoes and we've got the sun. What's
Yes,
next?
and so weather.
Weather.
So weather is the way we see weather. It's, I suppose, it's a more like a climate show, but weather is basically the transport system for fresh water. And it's very simplest. That's what weather is in terms of our series, at least. So most of the weather is formed over the oceans. Sun heats up water on the oceans. It creates water vapor, becomes clouds, and those clouds are moved around the planet by prevailing winds and the spin of the Earth. And where those clouds go are predictable. I mean, India's a classic example. You know about the monsoons.
Yeah,
You
believe me.
Yeah, you rely on them. So every summer, it starts in June, doesn't it? June,
Yeah.
July, something like that. So every June, July, you expect, depending on where you live in India, of course, because it's such a huge country,
Hmm.
but at a certain time of the year, you're expecting rains. And by predicting those rains, you know when to plant the crops, you know how to sort of, when to get the umbrella out, and so on and so forth. It makes our lives easier. And that is the issue, is that if those weather systems were to change, which they could do as a result of climate change, that means we can't look into the future, we can't predict. But anyway, going back to weather, it's the transport of fresh water, predominantly from the oceans, to land, and where where these clouds go and where the rains fall varies enormously. In some places you can have massive amounts of rain. I remember when I was growing up, we're doing geography, we were always told, you always look for the extremes. And Cherrapunji, Cherrapunji?
Well, I've not been there, but it's somewhere in our area.
Well,
Yes.
I don't know whether it's changed, but when I was growing up, it was always listed as the rainiest place on the
Yeah,
planet.
I think it still is. We'll claim it anyway, even if somebody
Yeah,
overtook
claim it.
us.
It's a good thing to claim. It's probably where
Yeah.
Bristol is probably just underneath,
Yeah.
and then the other end of the spectrum, you have the Atacama Desert, where in some places it might not rain for 4 or 5 years, maybe even longer. Maybe there's parts of the Atacama where it hasn't rained for a generation. And so the amount of rain is very variable. But the thing is that where it doesn't rain very much, it's as predictable as where it does rain very much. And as a result, plants and animals have adapted to whatever rain cycle that it has, that a country and a place has. So that's why you can find frogs living in the South African Namibian desert. It's one of our sequences. This beautiful little frog. It looks like a marshmallow if you have those in India. Little round thing with very stubby legs. And it lives underground. It buries itself in the sand, in the dunes underground. And when it rains, or when, at certain times of the year and at night, it comes out and it performs all its vital functions, finds food, mates, and makes the most of the tiny amounts of moisture that happen in this particular desert, like fog coming in off cold seas, or condense on vegetation. And that rain frog is very, very happy. It's not struggling in the desert. It's very happy because it knows it can go underground and come out and find just enough moisture to survive. But
All
what
right.
if those rain? Do you see what I'm saying? Is
No, I
that
do absolutely. I can take a similar point from let's say an oppressive regime rules over a country, and then you adapt to the oppressive regime and realize that you can only say this much and not more, etc. So the frog's doing the same thing. My problem is with the analogy of the marshmallow, which I love, and now I don't think I can eat a marshmallow again because I'm going to think of a frog mating with another frog while I eat the marshmallow. So Huw, that is a
yes?
little twisted
What
thinking, but yeah.
but when you see it, if you see the rain frog, you will say, "Oh my god, that's a marshmallow." It's a little rat. It's about the same size and shape as a marshmallow with tiny little legs. The female's bigger than the male, and when the male and female come together, because they've got little stubby legs and can hardly walk, let alone hop, what the male does is glue itself to the back of the female. so it can't fall off. So it's like sticking two pebbles together, or marshmallows. Actually, marshmallows
So
are much better.
doggy style becomes froggy style. I like that.
Frog, yeah, it's a frog style. Then not only once they couple up, then they go surreptitiously underneath the sand to perform the rest of their
Because now they're
mating.
modest suddenly.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think you may agree. I think the French will eat both the marshmallow and the frog. So we better be careful. Better keep it quiet.
Uh, I'm not going to comment on that. I'm sure you got French listeners.
No, come on. We hardly have any listeners. Nationality is not a problem. No xenophobia on this show. Everyone's welcome, including frogs and marshmallows. Probably will be our way to go. Let's move on then. So we've got that's the weather, and then
So
there's
ocean currents, ocean currents. So you think you've got to think of the oceans as just one ocean, not separate oceans like the Indian Ocean and Atlantic Ocean. They all join together. And there are these huge ocean currents that circulate water all around the planet. You know, every drop of water in our oceans rides these currents, and it can take 1,000 years to create a whole cycle. And these currents mostly start at the tops and bottoms of our planet, like the Arctic, where salt water sinks into the deep, and that sets in motion these powerful currents. And the currents are important because they're the things that moving the nutrients around. So if you imagine if currents stop, it just becomes this vast sort of like stagnant lake. You've got to have currents. You've got to have water movement because it's, things, when things die, when things, drift down in the ocean, they drift down to the bottom. And that's where all the nutrient base is very often. You've got phytoplankton, of course, that are at the top, photosynthesizing, and they form the basis of a lot of food chains. But phytoplankton, they still rely on nutrients being brought up by the currents as well as
but
sunlight, of
Hugh,
course.
how would you film the currents? I mean, would you go underwater? I
Yes.
mean, how do I see it?
Well, that's very, very good question, Cyrus. Very good question, because obviously currents are very difficult things to see. So, we've done it on a few occasions in the film. So we filmed these eider ducks in Norway, where they feed in these massively powerful currents, and you can see the currents here because the water is passing through a narrow gap. And you can see the power of the water moving, but it is tricky. So, what you're trying to do is show animal behavior and use that to illustrate why the behavior is happening in the first place. Like bait balls, for example. These are like the holy grail for wildlife films. These are when huge numbers of animals in the ocean come together in a very small point for quite a short period of time. So, for example, shoals of fish, come together in large shoals. They're feeding in nutrients in the currents, and then predators are sort of traveling along these currents looking for these shoals of fish. And when they catch them, they try to keep them at the surface, stop them going deep down, keep them at surface, corral them into a ball, and then they hammer them, basically to the point where there's literally no fish left. Okay. And sharks come, and seabirds come, and dolphins, and all kinds of things. And it's very, very intense, but it can happen like that, and then it can be gone in 15-20 minutes. So
And
it's
they
very
clean up,
difficult to film.
they eat up everything.
Yeah. Well, maybe a
Wow.
few stragglers manage to escape down to the bottoms, but on the whole, a bait ball is here 1 minute, gone the next.
Bait ball, some sort of
You can
animal
see that.
genocide.
Yeah, you
Ouch.
can see. Look at the opening sequence in the ocean episode. You'll see what I mean. That was filmed by a South African cameraman. It was filmed off South Africa, and he's filmed a number of bait balls over the years. And he said this was the most intense he'd ever filmed, because it
Eh,
was a big
so
bait ball and it literally absorbed him. He was in the water, and the school of fish just want to school around anything, and they saw him and thought, well, let's use him for safety. And then you had these sharks coming through, and
Wow.
dolphins, and
I always wanted to ask you that. When we watch these programs, we always argue about that, get really excited. When the predators are around, suddenly you feel the cameraman, of course, with technology, you don't have to be that close, but he's underwater at the end of the day, and this is a
but you
ravenous
do.
predator.
Well, if you're on land, of course, when you're filming tigers, you're often filming with a long lens, or maybe you're in a vehicle, but you're not close to the animal. In the ocean, you can't be too far away because you wouldn't have any visibility. Even in good visibility in the ocean, you may only get 10, 15, 20 meters at the most. So very often you're having to be very close to your subject. And you can't use a long lens. like you can on land. So, you are much closer to those predators than you would be on land. But the guys we use, or the women and men camera teams that we use, I mean, they're extremely experienced and they know how to read the signs.
And
And there's
also,
always safety divers and
you use a lot of them also in case anything happens. You can replace one with the other. I'm so sorry. That was so unnecessary.
yeah.
Uh, but I mean, really, why would you take a chance with a great white or a killer whale or an octopus for that matter? Sometimes
Yeah,
it's mind-boggling the
yeah.
fact that they have nerves of steel because once they're in, they're in.
Yes, exactly. It is.
And
Yeah.
what
It's
I mean, you guys are watching them, I suppose, on some feed, and there's nothing you can do.
well, the producer director is often in the water, and acting perhaps as part of the safety team. I
So
mean,
were
when
you
you're in
in?
the water, no, not I wasn't. I wasn't. I'm not really an underwater person, to be honest. I like water and like the ocean, but no, I mean, it requires a huge amount of specialization and a lot of training. And we never just have a cameraman in the water on his or her own. He or she is surrounded or very close to other divers who are looking out for his or her back. So it's very well thought through, I'll have to say. And you would expect me to say that as the series producer of this series.
Fair enough. There's insurance involved and all that, but for us as viewers, it's quite titillating in a nice way. My wife, for that matter, Aisha, is a photographer. She would love to do what you guys do, and she wears the pants in the house. I'm the caveman who sits at home, but she's
Is
envious. And
she
I know a lot of
talented?
people. Sorry,
Is she talented?
she's right
Have
behind
you?
me, so I'll say yes.
Yes.
Yeah. No, but I'm sure that lots of people out there who, when they see this, remarkable fact that you're so close to nature, that you see the what did you call it? Bait night,
Ball, a bait ball, a
bait
bait
ball.
ball. So, in other
Okay.
words, a ball full of bait fish.
Wow. I
That's
mean,
yeah.
unbelievable. I mean, there must be something. Your head would stand
Yes.
on the head top of your head. But okay. So that's because of time, we have got to gallop through everything. Which is the next one? There's one left, I think.
Well, there's humans.
Oh, how can we forget?
So yes,
How
how can we forget the few humans? And of course, people say, "Well, why do you include humans?" But I mean, humans are now a force. I mean, I told you about the Holocene, which is what people call the last 10,000 years, and now we're moving into something that scientists are referring to as the Anthropocene. An era that is dominated by humans. I mean, look how much we've changed this planet, and look at the impact we're having. It would be I think it would have been a huge error if we did a film about the forces of nature and we didn't include humans because they're having this impact on the natural forces. But, funny, it's very nice because it's a nice circular story because the first 4 hours we've been through are the natural forces, then the humans are upsetting those natural forces. But actually, the solution to our problems are the natural forces, the renewable energy, the sun's energy, ocean currents. Currents can form wave action, can create energy, uh, thermal energy, and so on and so forth. So that's what it's a rather nice series from that point of view. It sort of comes full circle.
I'll just ask you one question, which is a repeat from the first time we tried to take this plane off the ground and it didn't happen, which is I think most of us are worried that it's just too big a task, too enormous a task to actually, control your carbon footprint, to do the right thing. And I think because, I mean, you're talking about living with solar panels and, being politically correct and socially correct in every possible way. So, uh, what do we do?
Yes,
The
it is a
logistics, the
huge.
reality.
Yes, it is a huge task. There's no getting away from that. It's a massive task, but every single person can play his or her part because we've got to start doing something. I mean, no matter who you are, you could do something that reduces your carbon footprint, and that's what we've all got to do. Obviously, we haven't got very much time. We've got to make much bigger advances than we currently are, but there's lots of individual things that people can do. Eat less meat. I mean, India is actually very good for this because a lot of people are vegetarian. But in the Western world, eat less meat because cattle, are a big problem. We're having to chop down forests to create food to grow cattle, and cattle produce methane. So there's, it's better for the carbon footprint if you don't eat so much meat, if you cycle to work or walk to work instead of driving, you use energy efficient light bulbs, you just create, just use less. That's all that
So even if you just
everyone
take
can
one of
do.
those steps, if you just do one of those things,
Yes,
you're on the right track. Because I think
yes,
it's
absolutely.
possibly impossible to do everything or even close to that.
No, and I agree. And I also think it's not a good move to start wagging fingers, everybody,
Yeah.
because that's not going to help to say, oh, you shouldn't be on a flight, you shouldn't be, doing this, that, the other. I think, that's just not helpful. We're all hypocrites, pretty much, unless you're a carbon neutral person, unless
Us.
you're a man, you've got a massive beard and you're living in a hole in the ground and
That's
eating
half my
grass.
country. How dare you, Huw?
Well, then India's got nothing to worry about. The
There
rest of
you
us
go.
should be doing a lot more and following in India's lead. But everyone could do something. Last time we spoke, as you said, when we tried to get the plane off the ground the first time, as your analogy, I mentioned this book called "How Bad Are Bananas" by a guy called Mike Berners-Lee,
Hmm.
and he's the brother of Tim Berners-Lee, who invented the internet or started the internet. And in that book, it's a very simple guide to daily living, and everything that we do is sort of listed in this book. The common things we do is listed in the book, and the carbon footprint that it has, from plastic bags to buying fruit. And there's just really simple things you can do to change your lifestyle that will help this your carbon footprint. And as I mentioned to you last time, there are lots of things we can do that would make no difference to your standard of living, because most people see this climate change as a threat to their standard of living. Oh, I can't do this, I can't do that. Some of the things we can change and you won't even notice. Buying fruit and vegetables in season instead of buying them from the other side of the planet, which means they've had to get onto a plane and all the carbon that involves. So
I can
there's
do that.
loads to do, and you could do that. But I think and again, it's something I mentioned last time, is that we all know when we go into a supermarket what calorific content food has. People are sort of quite aware of that now. You go in, and if you pick up a chocolate bar, that's going to have higher calories than an apple. And what we've got to do is we've got to go shopping with a carbon footprint knowledge in our head. So we say, well, okay, I'll buy that, but to buy that carbon footprint is going to be X. Okay, do I want that, or should I go for something with a smaller carbon footprint? Literally, maybe it should. Every single product should, like calories and and where it's made, have something on it that says the carbon footprint of this item is this, and you can make a choice.
But that'll be like cigarettes and the ones with the large carbon print. I mean, they wouldn't want to keep it on the label, would they?
Yes, but maybe that's what governments. That's where governments are important. They just step in and say, look, we need to do this.
The oppressors. Yeah. Charging too much for parking. You guys, at least in London, I know you're Welsh, but nobody drives cars anymore. This is what they do, governments. Make you cycle, so you win at the end.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, actually, over the pandemic, it's quite incredible. Cities across the country, councils have been changing the sort of the roads to make it more cycle and
Friendly.
pedestrian friendly. And actually, some of the car owners are up in arms. But it's the way we have to go. People have got to get wise. We just can't carry on doing the same old thing.
Yeah, there's a big difference though culturally, because you guys, the cyclist is king on the road, and the car sort of has to give way and allow the cyclist to carry
Oh,
on.
don't you believe it, Cyrus? I'm a cyclist, and not everybody feels that way, I can tell you. But yes, we have a lot of cyclists, and it's probably one of the most popular hobbies these days, it seems. I mean, if you want to buy a good bike now, it's about 5-month waiting list.
Yeah, but I could think that could be a revolution. I know the car lobby and the diesel and gas lobby will fight tooth and nail and all that, but I can see that happening maybe in the next few years, where people say, "What the hell? I really don't need a vehicle unless I'm going really far."
Yeah.
That could happen.
But it's being made more convenient all the time. You need to get past that critical mass. Electric cars are here. Okay, every single car manufacturer are building electric cars, and it needs to get to that critical mass where owning electric car is convenient. There are charging spots everywhere, and then people think, "Oh, I'll have an electric car," and suddenly, you're not polluting the cities in which you live. You're burning less fuel, assuming the obviously the energy, the electricity you're using to charge your battery comes through a renewable source. But of course, it's a stage, and then of course you'll get to a situation where maybe people don't need cars because there are driverless electric cars everywhere, and you'll just get your phone out and go to the app and say, I want a car now, and one will turn up without a driver and
Hmm.
take you somewhere. I mean, don't forget, a car spends 23 out of every 24 hours probably parked on a pavement. I
True.
mean,
But
completely
this is why,
useless.
Hugh, I feel, we should allow for poverty, because when you're poor, you don't have a car. So maybe that's one way of looking at it. Just keep the people poor. Nobody can buy the car, electric or otherwise, and you're stuck. Run or maybe cycle, maybe share a cycle, certain countries. You pay no attention, but quickly, as we go into break, a couple of personal questions. I was going through your biodata, the kind of work you've done. I mean, Richard Attenborough, the Tigers, this, that. I mean, there's so
David
much.
Attenborough.
Oh, sorry, David
Eh,
Attenborough.
Yeah.
Richard Attenborough fan because we watch the film every year. You know which one.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
yeah, it's something we have to do apparently. But coming back to you, so how did the young Hugh get into all this? What was, if you could just recall your trip all the
Yes,
way
well, the
here?
young Hugh. So when I was very, very small, I was just really interested in animals. That was my key interest. I wasn't interested in trains and planes and automobiles like a lot of boys. I was fortunate in the sense that I lived in lots of different countries. My father was a geologist for an oil company. Oil company. It's not sound good. Sounds so good now,
Hey, hey,
but
hey.
but anyway, back in the day,
Yeah.
and he was posted lots of different places. So our family traveled and lived in different places. So I had access to lots of different kind of wildlife, and so I was always passionate about wildlife. It was a natural interest, and then I was thinking, from the age of about 5 to 12, I really wanted to be a wildlife photographer. That was my dream. And then at school, I stopped doing all science subjects, which wasn't good for getting into this business. Our school had very bad science teachers. I hope none of them are listening now, but
Uh,
that
which school is that? Just to belabor the point and make sure they do.
I probably better not mention it because they had very good
We can
art
Google
subjects.
it. Hugh, they can Google it in a minute. It'll be all
Yeah,
over the
you can.
net. He
Well,
denies his school teachers. Huh.
no, I'll tell you, it was actually a boarding school in Somerset called Downside, and it was run by
Oh,
monks.
Ian Botham country. Excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, and anyway, and they had great arts teachers, and so I sort of like found myself channeled into the art subjects. So I just figured that when I left school and then went to university to do history and politics, that my dreams of being in the wildlife film business or the wildlife photography business was over. But my girlfriend at university, who is now my wife, Lizzie, she was a geography graduate and she got a job with a independent production company in London, the only one making wildlife films. And she got the job with the company first, and was able to tell me when a job came up. They didn't know we were together, and I went for the job and got it. Although I should say that in the intervening period between me getting a job and her being there, I did an expedition film for the BBC. It was a very, very competitive thing to get onto. There were like 80 or 90 groups applied the year we did, and they select only 4 groups. And we were going to cycle across Tibet. This was in 1989, never been done
Wow.
before. And I thought this was, I was very lucky to get onto it. There were 2 other guys who I didn't really know, but I was on as the videographer. And we were due to go in, I think it was about May or June. And we got sponsored by Ridgeback, which was a cycle company, and everything was looking good. And we'd been selected for the Mick Burke Award, this BBC Expedition Filmmaking Award. And 2 weeks before we were due to go, they closed the borders
Kashmir.
to Tibet. Yes, no, to Tibet, to
Yeah.
Tibet. So our alternative was to cycle across the Himalayas. This is the reason for the story. Bring it back to India.
Right.
And so I did this massive cycle trip across the Himalayas with these 2 guys. We made a little film and it went on TV. It was a very, very bad film because we were the cyclists as well as the filmmakers. And of course, when anything interesting happened, we were on the bikes. Anyway, notwithstanding the terrible film,
Yeah.
it was good for my CV. And so when I went for my job interview at Partridge Films, this film company that my wife or girlfriend at the time was working in, I got the job and then started from nothing, started low down, general assistant, making tea. And here I am today.
Wow. We'll put in the relevant music. Don't you worry. Just quickly to understand. So, but you've shot wildlife because you love animals. You've come close to the tiger.
Yes.
Tell us about some of the hair raising moments. There must have been some.
Oh yes, there have been some hair-raising moments. But I'll give you a couple of. I'll give you an India one, for example. So I worked on a series called Land of the Tiger
Yep.
with Val McThapper. Do you know who Val McThapper is?
Well, of
Very,
course. Yeah,
yeah, it's
Mr. Tiger
Val,
here.
very, yeah,
He and
very
Bittu
larger than
Sehgal. Yeah,
life.
yeah, yeah. With
Yeah,
the
big
beard
beard,
and
very,
yeah.
yeah, very powerful,
Looks a bit
very
like a
powerful
tiger
guy.
himself, yes.
Well, tiger personality. He was very,
For
he was
sure.
quite fierce.
Yeah.
He was quite fierce. And on the series, I got my first opportunity to see a tiger, and unbelievable. It's still one of my most memorable sights, seeing the tiger for the first time, which was in Bandhavgarh. But I was doing this film in the south, in the in a
Karnataka?
no, it was it was in Tamil Nadu in Animalai. That sort of those sort of what do they call? I've just forgotten the name of the mountains there.
Uh,
There's the spine that runs
Producer, find
down.
out the mountains in Tamil Nadu quickly. The Welshman and the Indian have no idea, so
Oh, you
it'll
know what
come
it's
back.
like.
We'll
It's
figure.
I was just trying to kind of just went, but anyway, there were tropical forests there, and I was in this tropical forest with a camera man, and we found a very brightly coloured snake. And I thought, oh, that's nice. Well, let's get a few shots of the snake. It's not going to be a sequence, but just sort of like capturing the atmosphere of this jungle. And so the cameraman got down low, and we filmed this snake traveling through the leaf litter, and it looked pretty good. And the guy turned to me, David Shell, the cameraman's name was, and he said, "Oh, let's get another shot of that. Why don't you just bring the snake back a little bit, and we'll just do that again?" And I was like, okay. And he said, no, that's fine. This is just a false mimic. It looks venomous, but it's actually not. It's one of the sort of mimics. Okay. So it's pretending to be venomous. And this guy was a herpetologist. So I thought, well, he knows about snakes. So, okay. So I picked the snake up very carefully, gently, not
Ouch.
harming it. And I moved it back, 20 feet or something. And it went through the leaf litter, and it was great. By the way, this is back in the 90s. We don't tend to do this anymore. And so we got the shot, and we got a few more shots, and then he said, well, maybe we should just get a shot of it going over these rocks or something, but the light had gone. So he said, well, just we'll put it in this sort of like a snake bag. So we had a little tied canvas bag, and I just picked the snake up and I dropped it in the bag and tied the thing. I was just carrying it around, and as I was carrying it, I looked down, and there was all this gloopy liquid sort of dripping out of the bottom of the bag, which was venom. And this snake wasn't a mimic at all. It was one of the highly venomous snakes that this cameraman had just got me to pick up
What was it? A
several
viper?
times. No, to be honest, I can't quite remember. This is 25, 30 years,
Because a
25
cobra
years
you'd
ago.
have been able to pick up.
No, oh no, it wasn't
As
a
in,
cobra. No, I mean that would have been obvious. But I have to say that interactions with wildlife, I mean, like that, I mean, they don't happen
but
anymore.
did the young boy in you, recall your dreams of being with these animals? And suddenly you're in the middle of a forest with a ferocious
Yes.
serpent or the lord of the jungle or an elephant.
But Cyrus, here's the thing that I'm never frightened of the animals. You're much more frightened about the people, and getting in cars in certain places and the quality of the roads. I mean, generally speaking, the animals are the least of your worries. I've been very, very fortunate. I have to say, I've traveled to probably 70 countries and seen some amazing wildlife, including lots of large predators, animals that could be an issue, and lots of small predators that could also be an issue, like venomous snakes and spiders. But the thing I worry about most are definitely people and cars, bad
Who are the
roads.
scariest people, Hugh,
Oh, I couldn't
of all?
possibly say. Angry people. Angry people. Those are
Well
the
done.
scariest
Well
people.
played with a straight back, Hugh.
Yeah.
Excellent. Better than the boys are
Yes.
doing in Ahmedabad as we speak. We'll
I
take a
I
quick
know.
break. We'll take a quick break.
Yeah.
Sorry, we'll take a break. We'll come back. And now
Yeah.
we'll ask you questions which are coming in from, because this is a fascinating topic for lots of people. We don't get this very often. So we'll milk it a little bit if you don't mind. So in a
Yeah, not at
second, we'll
all.
be back with Huw Cordey. Silvery, just getting the producer on.
Hello,
Good
hi.
looking young man, 12 years old with a beard.
Yes.
Um, are we good to
All right.
roll?
Yes, let's go. The first AMA question comes in from Harshil Shah. He says, "Hi, Cyrus and guest. Hi, Cyrus and Huw." He says, "Hope you're doing well. Ever since I was a child, I've been a huge fan of wildlife documentaries like those of Discovery Channel, National Geographic, Animal Planet, etc., etc. Some of the
Uh,
planet documentaries
BBC,
voiced
Sony, to be mentioned
He
first.
didn't
Yeah,
actually.
Sony,
He didn't
Sony
mention
BBC Earth.
BBC.
he did. Okay, that's good enough.
Did he?
All right.
Okay.
Yeah. Some of these planet documentaries voiced by the great Sir David Attenborough are truly mesmerizing. Firstly, Cyrus, have you ever had the chance of meeting or interacting with Sir Attenborough? And secondly, considering your love for animals and the environment, would you ever consider narrating these kinds of documentaries?
Yeah, I thought he had the easier job, all said and done. Then towards the second half of his life. But let Hugh enlighten us because he's actually experienced
Yeah.
uh, the David Attenborough culture.
Yes, I have been again very, very fortunate to have worked with Sir David on numerous occasions. My first uh, working relationship with him was back in sort of late 90s, early 2000s when we were doing Life of Mammals. And he was the presenter of that. And so I traveled around the world at lots of different destinations uh, filming him. And we did come to India actually on that series twice. We went to the Rat Temple of Deshnok and the Kumbh Mela. David's famously loves all wildlife, but rats he didn't particularly like. So it probably wasn't a memorable trip for him. But David is now 94 years old, coming up to 95, and he's still going strong. I mean, he just did a speech for the UN Security Council last week, which our company filmed, as a matter of fact. And he still got the same enthusiasm, still wants to communicate messages. Right now, of course, he's very, very um, focused on the issue of climate change. But he's just an amazing communicator, obviously a huge intellect. But when you're traveling with him, he's got a very good sense of humor. He's a great raconteur, as you can imagine, with somebody with his range of experiences. Um, he was always sort of wanting to muck in. He's very modest. I mean, I remember being in restaurants in various places, and somebody would come up to him and say, "Oh, Sir David," coming, just a member of the public coming up to our table, and would say, "Oh, Sir David, oh, how lovely to see you. I saw your last series. I thought it was fantastic." And he would look at this person and go, "Oh, really? Oh, you saw it? Oh, well, how lovely. Thank you very much indeed." He was always sort of self, sort of modest and self-deprecating. Um, just a very easy person to be around. Doesn't suffer fools gladly for sure, but which obviously can be an issue. People like me, but he was generally one of the crew, always wanting to muck in, carry bags. I mean, he didn't even go business class until he was in his
What?
80s.
What?
Yes, I'm not joking you.
Wow.
Yes, so
Why? Why
let me
suffer when
tell
you're a legend?
well, let me tell all your famous and celebrity guests or listeners out there, Cyrus, that David Attenborough went economy class, when we were doing Life of Mammals, and he carried on going economy class until I think he was in his 80s that he stopped and started going business class. So, he's not a prima donna.
Oh, some would say just being cheap, but I wouldn't.
Uh, may-
A lot of
no,
respect.
maybe
Did
he
he?
just didn't know he was eligible for a business class series.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I see. Well, no. Sometimes you'd queue up, and the check-in staff would look at David and say, "Well, can we upgrade you, David?" And he would say,
Wow.
"Well, I, I'm only going to be upgraded if you upgrade the crew."
Wow.
And
Could
he
have been a
was
could have been a fine politician. Huh? Nature's gain was
exactly.
politics' loss. Wasn't he
Yeah.
instrumental in bringing Monty Python in as well?
Exactly.
Actually,
Everyone thinks of David as just being the face of wildlife, and of course, that's a massive accolade in itself, given what he's done for natural history. But he was also, nearly the Director General of the BBC. In fact, he would have been had he stayed on. But he was controller of BBC One. He brought colour television in. He was responsible for that. He introduced snooker on television, I think, and there were loads of accolades that he had from his days as being a television exec. So yeah, just, done some amazing things that are not connected to TV. He also has an incredible collection of tribal artifacts. He's just interested in lots of different things.
colorful life, Silvery, not like you and me. We just sit in our silly homes, wait for COVID to disappear, and nothing happens. This
Yeah.
man's been, Hugh's gone himself to 70 odd countries and seen some 10,000 cultures and animals. And what have we done? Our lives are passing us by.
Yeah,
All right,
I know.
next question.
All right. Next question comes in from Shivani Kerlekar. Excuse me. Shivani Kerlekar asks, Dear Cyrus and guest, I'm an intern at a film production house in Mumbai. I don't think my workplace really cares about interns though. They're not interested in teaching us, not interested in doing anything that could help us find our footing in this industry in the future. We just sit around most of the day doing nothing. According to you, what's the skill or what aspects of filmmaking should we as interns be learning at this point so that we can have a future in this industry?
Okay, so Hugh, this one's back to you again, but this is your other side as a member
Well,
of a
this is
production.
this is an obvious answer here. You've just got to make really good tea. I
Yeah.
mean, when I left university, with a degree, my first job was working in Soho in London in a post-production facility, and I did nights and days. We did 12-hour stretches for virtually no money, and we made tea and got Chinese meals for people at the middle of the night. And that, joking aside, I mean, a lot of people have started like that, and I think a proper answer to your listener's question is that what she should definitely not do is sit around, because she's got to somehow show that she's got enthusiasm, drive, and motivation. So even if they don't appear to be interested in her, she must try to push through that, because someone will notice her and they'll say, "Oh, this is a can-do person." When you're at the bottom and you're trying to start off, people are looking for two things, a motivated person and somebody they can get on with. And if they see somebody just sitting around doing nothing, it might be justified, because maybe they don't really care about the interns. But you've got to forget about that, because if you want to get on, you've just got to focus and say, "Look, I'll do whatever it takes." Within,
So
I
tell,
mean, within reason, obviously,
no,
within the reason of the job.
to take the point further, Hugh's spot on, I think. Just tell her to wear really bright clothing. I think in our dull climate, sometimes you're not able to see people properly. It's good to wear bright clothing, just catch the eye. And then what Hugh says applies, just be more exuberant and out there so they notice you. Worst case, if they sack her anyway, what difference does it make, really? All right, next one.
All right. Next one comes in from Jalasmi Rakesh. She says, Hey, Cyrus, Silvery, and guest. You remember in the beginning of the pandemic, when global lockdowns and shutdowns started happening, we would hear cool stories about how animals were slowly recovering their habitats from human occupation slash hazards. I sometimes feel that sorry. I sometimes feel that it's almost worth it to be working from home and to have these shutdowns like this so that animals can reclaim some of their home. What are your thoughts? What
It's a
do
good
you think this
point,
is at all
Hugh.
possible?
Hugh, we got the sparrow back
Yeah.
here in South Mumbai, which we hadn't seen for years. Suddenly it returned. I thought it was gone,
Yes.
the small sparrow.
It's gone from the UK. I mean, the numbers of sparrows have absolutely collapsed, but that's another story. It's absolutely your listener, what she just or he shared. I don't who was it, he or she?
She, Jalasmi.
She,
She said it's absolutely true. Animals have been able to reclaim certain places. I mean, I did you see that those amazing sights of the flamingos in Mumbai last
Yes,
year?
yes,
I
yes.
mean, they do come every year, but they were in fantastic numbers, which I think is partly a result of the lockdowns. But actually, there's been another sort of unexpected benefit of the lockdown and pandemics. Far fewer animals have been killed on the roads. And when you think, huge numbers, and I mean massive numbers of young animals are killed every summer on, roads in the West. Um, those animals, are out there enjoying their lives. So, obviously populations of some animals must have gone up, but here's the thing: it's not quite as good as you might think, because with nobody traveling around, with no tourism, there's no money going into these reserves and parks. Park rangers in some places have had their salaries cut by, down to a fifth. And with little money, how are these families going to make a living? Maybe they've had to exploit the very places they would normally protect. Maybe they've had to, chop down trees, grow plants, poach some animals for food. I mean, with no money coming in, what are these people to do? So, there is a worrying aspect to the lockdowns and the lack of tourism. And perhaps we need to think, this is a wake-up call, maybe we need to think about how we can fund these amazing reserves, these wild places, of which India has got phenomenal wild places, because I've been very lucky to have been to them. How are we going to fund these places which doesn't wholly rely on tourism?
Let me just clarify for the young man. Silvery is only 16 years old. Silvery by wild places, he doesn't mean the discotheque and all that you used to go
Oh,
to in the
okay.
old days. These are actual forests with
Ah,
animals that
damn it.
exist in our country, which we don't know about because we live in this stupid city, which is going nowhere at the moment.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's worth pointing out, Cyrus. Yes.
there you go. Slap for the day.
Right.
Silvery, one more. Can we squeeze
One
in?
last one, yes.
Yeah.
This last one comes in from Rohini. She says, "Hi, Cyrus, Silvery, and guest again. Uh, what can we as humans do to safeguard the polar bear? They are on the verge of extinction, and I find it very hard that there's nothing we can do, and they're just being killed and being taken for granted."
More than kill, there's no food, right, Huw? There's no food for them, food
Yeah,
source.
this is a very difficult subject because I mean, polar bears aren't being killed directly by humans on the whole. Of course, some in some places they get hunted, by traditional people. But the bigger problem is what's happening to their habitat. So they live in the northern part of our planet, in the Arctic, and with melting ice, it's becoming more difficult for them to hunt their favorite food, which are seals. And so this goes back to the subject that we were talking about earlier, Cyrus, about what we can do to reduce the impact of climate change, because that's how we save polar bears, reducing our carbon footprint. Isn't it incredible to think that an animal that's like so far from away from us, most of us will never ever see in our whole lives, is being affected by what we're doing 3 or 4 thousand miles to the south. But that is what's happening. Each year there's less ice. It's more difficult for these polar bears to hunt, and yes, it's gonna affect their populations. So
And so, how
this
bad
is
is it
climate
right
change.
now, Huw? Is it possible to reverse the situation, or is it really, really bad? Because I've read some horribly negative articles.
Well, a lot of scientists that study the subject talk about the tipping points. You get to such a point where doesn't matter what you do, you've already gone over the edge, and the big tipping points are things like the melting of the Arctic ice, the deforestation of the Amazon, overfishing, the permafrost in Siberia. It gets to a point if the temperature of the planet goes up too much and creates a cascading effect on these huge areas that stabilize our planet, then we're in trouble. But I don't think we've got to that point. Look, I'm not I'm the first to say I'm not an expert in this. I would say I'm knowledgeable. I've got a keen interest, but I'm not expert on all the data. But my feeling and the feeling of the people I work with is that it's definitely not too late. There are things we can do, but time is running out. We really need to make big changes in the next decade, and that's not a long time.
So we've got the tiger in trouble, the polar bear, so many other populations getting closer to extinction. What about my tribe, the Parsis? There are very few of us left. Can you help with that, Huw? Can you do a documentary? We'll go underwater for you.
Um, I'm you've I'm not always stuck for words, Cyrus, but I'm not sure what to say about the Parsis.
You
You'll
you
have
you
to give me a
save
bit more detail.
you save the polar bear. We're a tribe that came from Iran and settled down here when the
Okay.
Islamization happened there, etc.,
Yeah.
etc. So a small group came to Gujarat, west of India, and settled down here. Now, because of policy where you're not allowed to marry outside, etc., etc. To cut a long story short, there's about 70,000 left, and we're down to a tribe status, literally. And the tipping point has happened with us, apparently.
Oh dear. Well, doesn't sound
Yes.
like there's no. It's. I don't think your tipping point's reached. It sounds as if there's still hope, and I'm sure you can come back. I should probably know more about the subject since my wife is half Iranian. Um,
Exactly. Please ask her. She will know.
yes.
They threw us
Mm.
out. Man of speaking. No, I'm just kidding. Listen, it's been wonderful talking to you. I want to ask you one last question before we wind up and say bye bye. If Huw was, born an animal, this is such a tough question. Which animal would that be? Who's your token animal or totem animal?
Oh God, yes. You'd like to think it would be something. Initially you would think, oh, it's got to be something with a long life. Like
Majestic.
I was very lucky. I went to this amazing atoll, coral atoll in the Indian Ocean called Aldabra, very very remote, uninhabited place. And on this atoll were these giant tortoises, and there's 100,000 of them on this island. And these giant tortoises, some of them were over 200 years old. They were 250 kilos and 200, 250 years old. So you might think that's quite a good animal to be because they live a long time. But actually, they're a little bit of a boring life, you know, and
it's like being in lockdown.
Yes, they sort of wander around very, very slowly, eating not very much. I mean, they're fascinating, but probably not that. And then you think, oh, a predator like a tiger, that would be absolutely amazing. Or a leopard. A leopard is one of my favorite animals because they're just phenomenal. And I think a leopard would be a great thing to be when it was in its prime. I mean, the thing about being a predator, when they sort of slip out of their prime, oh, it's not a very nice life. So I don't know.
There is
A bird of paradise. How about that?
A bird of paradise. I like the tortoise. 250 kilos of muscle and doing absolutely nothing. Oh, that's the life. Silvery, what's your spirit animal?
There is a leopard in roaming around around my area right now, just out in the wild.
Powai.
Because in Powai, because this happens like often enough, like about once in 2 years, there'll be a random sighting of a leopard in some building somewhere. So that happens often.
Yes, I mean it's part of one of the reasons why I admire them so much, because a leopard can come into a city like Mumbai and go around and survive, taking dogs off doorways and and piglets and such like. I mean, amazing animal, absolutely amazing.
Yep. If I had to pick an animal, I would be an octopus, because an octopus can just camouflage with anything.
The octopus doesn't have a penis.
It doesn't? Oh, well, works out perfect. Okay. I don't have to worry about dating.
Good choice, young man. Yes.
Also, octopuses don't live very long. They're very intelligent, but
heart issues.
I don't think they live very long. Some of them only live just 2 or 3 years. Cyrus, you haven't said what your spirit animal is.
I would like to be a wolf. I'm a pack animal. It's my favorite animal. They mate for life. See? And
nice.
Yeah, the social conditioning of the wolf is my thing. But then I don't look like a wolf, so I'm happy to be a seal. I'm sacrificing myself for a polar bear. Go ahead.
You're a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Something like that, yeah.
No, a wolf is that is another very, very cool animal. So
also,
fabulous.
I'm dog crazy, so the wolf is one cousin away, so that's also important.
Yeah, exactly. Amazing animals, amazing.
All right. Awkward pause as we come to the end of the show.
No, I thought you were going to say something, so I stopped.
No, I thought you were carrying on about the wolf, because we've learned so much from you. We've actually kept quiet for a lot of the show.
Well, I filmed wolves. I could tell you an anecdote about filming wolves.
Please do.
Well, okay. So we filmed wolves in Newfoundland. Oh, not Newfoundland, in northern Canada, and these wolves what's astonishing about wolves is their stamina. Okay, so these wolves would set off from their dens and they would just trot and run for mile after mile and mile. We were following them in helicopters, with very powerful gyrostabilized camera systems. And, if they saw a caribou, then they would start running at it and they would just run and run and run. It seems like they had ceaseless energy. It was extraordinary. And obviously I should mention in Perfect Planet, the series that, this has the reason why this is coming out. Planet, for sure. I'm going to plug Perfect Planet because we filmed.
I'll say it again. Perfect Planet, yeah.
Yes, 8th of March, premiering on Sony BBC Earth.
Yes.
Yeah, 9 p.m.
9 p.m.
And we filmed wolves in Ellesmere Island in the high Arctic in Canada, and these are white wolves. And we filmed them at night in the Arctic winter, and it's just astonishing. I mean, it went down to -50. Okay, one of our cameramen got frostbite on his cheek, and these wolves are happily just walking around, and they survive in this twilight world for like 4 or 5 months. They don't hibernate, obviously, and they try to catch these huge hairy beasts called musk oxen, and they're pretty formidable. But as a pack, they can overcome them. And then we also filmed them hunting Arctic hares. So in the winter, Arctic hares are white because of the snow, and they gather in these huge sort of herds that nobody had ever filmed before. In fact, nobody really knew much about them. It was almost anecdotal, but we saw it and filmed it. And do please have a look at the sequence in episode 2 of A Perfect Planet, because the shots of these wolves chasing Arctic hares in these huge herds is quite something.
And you never try to stop and, feeling bad for the prey, sort of stop the hunt. Would you ever do that?
I mean, it's an interesting question in the sense that, we are emotional animals ourselves, and it's hard to see some prey animals being caught and torn apart. But of course, as wildlife filmmakers, we never, ever, ever get in the way of nature. I mean, when I was working on a previous series called The Hunt, we were filming wild dogs chasing wildebeest. And wild dogs, they've got small mouths, and when they trap a wildebeest, they bring it to the ground, but they can't do a neck hold like a tiger or a lion or a leopard. And so they just eat the thing alive. And it's the most horrific thing to watch. But wild dogs are so impressive. I mean, these African hunting dogs, it's just so unbelievably impressive, like the wolf, that you can't help but admire them. But it's not a thing you want to watch for sure. It's really quite disturbing. But why should a predator not get its food like a prey is able to eat, and the predator has to have the same rights? So we never intervene.
It's like McDonald's. You have to serve everyone, end of the day, which is something we should remind people: eat less meat. That's one way
Yes.
to reduce the carbon footprint. Huw, this has
Well,
been
yeah.
great talking to you. Took us 2 attempts, but I think we've come out with the perfect program for the perfect planet on Sony BBC Earth. So please check it out. It's on 8th March at 9 p.m. And lots more from Huw, lots more documentaries left in his arsenal. We'll get to see that as well. In the meantime, it's bye-bye from all of us. It's what, lunchtime for you?
Coming up, I think it's 12:30.
But you can't go anywhere, so
Yeah, no, I'll go downstairs to my kitchen.
Oh, excellent. All
That's the
right.
big journey.
I'll go upstairs to my kitchen. Silvery, where are you going?
I'll go out of my room and get some tea.
And look for the leopard. All
Yeah,
right.
look for the leopard.
And please don't say
Yeah,
here, pussy, here, pussy. That doesn't work.
yes. Don't dress
Okay.
up as a dog.
All right.
Oh, ouch.
Thank you.
All right. All right, you. Brilliant. Cheers. Thank you so much. Bye-bye,
Thank you
guys.
very much.
everyone.
Thank you very much, Cyrus. Cyrus, it's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it.
Oh, the pleasure's all
And
mine, you. Trust me.
I hope I managed to find some of the answers that you were looking for.
Oh, it's
Um,
excellent. Eye-opener and fun. No worries.
Yes. Take care, and
right.
maybe hopefully see you another time.
Yep.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye. Cheerio.